You ever had someone look you dead in the eye and tell you point blank that you don't belong? Well, that's what happened to me. A woman never met me before in my life, didn't know my name, had the nerve to stand there on the shore of my lake and say, "You don't belong here." She wasn't some stranger passing by. No, she was Dolores, the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, and she wasn't about to back down. Now behind her, I had 11 boats on my docks. 11 boats with families all laughing and enjoying themselves, enjoying my property without paying a dime. Not a dollar. Nada. And it wasn't some secret deal either. I had the deed in hand, my name on the title. But Dolores wasn't about to let that fact stop her. She stepped closer, jabbing her finger at my chest, and get this, she started calling the neighbors over. "Everyone, this man is trying to take our lake," she shouted. And before I knew it, she's calling 911, telling them there's a man trespassing on our community property. I'm standing there like, "Excuse me." And of course the officer shows up, looks at my deed, looks at her, and says nothing. The next day I walk out to my dock, those 11 boats gone. Just like that. Dolores did it to herself. But let me tell you, this isn't just a petty neighborhood squabble. There's a lesson in here about power control and how easy it is for people to take what's not theirs when they assume you won't fight back. You see, Mill Lake wasn't some postcard perfect body of water, not the kind of lake that you'd see on a brochure, no. It was cold, dark water tucked away in a corner of Clearwater Pines, a quiet little subdivision 40 minutes outside of Fredericksburg, Virginia. It smelled like pine resin and mud in the summer. There's a rusty old boat launch on the east side and a short dock on the north side that looks like it's held together with prayers. I fell in love with it immediately. Found it through an estate sale buried on some obscure county property auction site. The owner was Harlan Beakey, 81 years old, no heirs, and he passed away the winter before I bought it. The lake was listed as a separate parcel from the surrounding HOA land, had been for years. It was always separate. Harlan owned it since '87, and the community just kind of used it. No contracts, no payments, just permission. I paid $47,000 for 6 acres of private lake, all mine. And guess what? The HOA, they had paid Harlan nothing. Nada. Zip. Zilch. Those boats on my dock, they hadn't paid for access either. But suddenly, Dolores was trying to change the rules. I grew up in Zanesville, Ohio. My dad worked double shifts at a stamping plant, and my mom clipped coupons like it was her second job. Nothing was handed to me. I worked my way up from construction to foreman. Got burned by a shady contractor who walked off with 80 grand of my money. Spent the next 2 years learning about property law contracts, what it means to actually own something. So when I got that letter from Dolores full of threats and legal jargon, I wasn't scared. Not for a second. I read it 3 times, then made myself a pot of coffee. I wasn't about to pay $1,200 for a permit on land I owned. I wrote them a response. 20 minutes to write, 45 seconds to sign. I politely declined their request for a permit. I mentioned that my deed recorded and insured didn't have any language about a lake use permit. I wished Dolores a pleasant autumn. I mailed it certified return receipt. And then Dolores had the gall to defame me in their newsletter. She sent out a newsletter claiming I was hostile to the community, saying I might restrict access to the lake. A blatant lie. So I did what anyone would do. I sent it to a defamation lawyer. She said, "Keep every copy. It's going to escalate." And sure enough, it did. The HOA sent a second letter. This time they were talking about prescriptive easement, claiming that the community had used the lake for years and that they had a right to keep using it. Now let me explain this legal nonsense. Prescriptive easement means if someone uses your land openly for 15 years without permission, they can claim a right to use it. But here's the kicker: Harlan had given them permission. Informally, sure, but permission all the same. So I had an attorney dig into it. He found proof that Harlan had actually sent them a formal offer for a lease in 2019, $3,600 annually to access the lake. They ignored it. And once I found that out, that was game over. Dolores had no idea what she was messing with. The situation started to get even more tense. Dolores held an emergency community meeting where she stirred up outrage. She talked about protecting our community, but she never mentioned how they'd been using a dead man's lake for free, with no legal right to do so. Meanwhile, I'm making calls and getting more dirt on the HOA. But then something unexpected happened. Harriet, a neighbor who had known Harlan for years, came to me with a box full of papers, Turns out Harlan had sent a formal lease proposal to the HOA back in 2019, and they had never responded. They just ignored him, waiting for him to die. It was one of those moments where everything clicked. They had knowingly been using someone else's property, and now they were trying to steal it from me. I was done playing nice. I hired a lawyer, and we built a case that would make them regret ever trying to mess with me. The HOA's next move was a dock inspection. Dolores had sent a county official to inspect my dock, hoping to find something wrong with it. But when the officer came, he found nothing. My dock was fine. But Dolores wasn't done yet. She sent out petitions trying to gather support from the community. She had 180 signatures, claiming it was a majority. But here's the thing, Clearwater Pines has 340 homes. That means 160 households didn't even care enough to sign. Still, Dolores didn't back down. She showed up at my place demanding I remove the locks from the docks. She called 911 again. The officer who came, he looked at my paperwork, confirmed it was all legal, and told Dolores there was nothing she could do. Then came the sweet part. Cecilia Drum, a local journalist, came to cover the story. Her article exposed the HOA for what they were spending $22,000 of residents' money to build docks on land they didn't own. Dolores resigned from the board shortly after. It was over. But here's the twist. The real victory didn't come from the courts. It came from the community realizing that they'd been lied to. The truth was out, and Dolores couldn't cover it up anymore. So what's the moral of this story? Well, it's simple. Don't ever underestimate the power of knowing what you own. Dolores thought she could bully me into submission because she assumed I didn't know the law. She was wrong. And once you know the law, it's game over. Now I ask you, what do you actually own that you've never checked the paperwork on? If you've ever had a run-in with an HOA, drop your story in the comments. I want to hear it. And if this story hit close to home for you, share it. Someone you know needs to hear it. Because the next story, it makes this one look like a warm-up.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.